In the news tonight, investigators of the deadly crash of a Russian plane in Egypt says it's not struck from the outside and the pilot does not make a distress call before it disappears from radar. Israeli troops kill a Palestinian in the occupied West Bank and 3 Israelis are stabbed near Tel Aviv. And Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan says the return of his Islamist-rooted AK party to single-party rule is a vote for stability. Good evening and welcome to the 10 o'clock news. His Majesty the King, the Supreme Commander of the Jordan Armed Forces Arab Army, was out in the field for a tactical drill by units of the Joint Special Operations Command. Before the start of the drill, attended by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the King's Military Advisor, General Mash'al al-Zibin, and His Royal Highness Prince Faisal ibn al-Hussein, the Supreme Commander was briefed on the stages and progress of the military games. The drill included combat in built-up zones with support from fixed-wing aircraft that were recently brought into service in the armed forces, as well as attack helicopters. It also involved landing by paratroopers in addition to live ammunition fire using personal and support weapons, where participants displayed high combat skills and precision in the various operations of the exercise. The Supreme Commander praised the advanced fighting skills and techniques used by the Special Forces. The Russian plane that crashed in Sinai Peninsula was not struck from the outside and the pilot did not make a distress call before it disappeared from radar. That is what a source in the committee analyzing the flight recorders has concluded. The flight recorders was recovered from the Airbus A321 which crashed in the Sinai Peninsula on Saturday, killing all 224 people on board. Russian President Vladimir Putin called on investigators to build an objective picture of what happened. Asked if a terrorist attack could be to blame, Putin's spokesman said no theory could yet be ruled out. Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said a full investigation into causes of the Russian air crash is the key task. Here's more.
Crowds are growing at the St. Petersburg morgue, where relatives of victims from the Russian airline crash in Egypt will submit DNA to help identify the remains. Saturday's crash of Metrojet's Airbus A321 in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula killed all 224 people on board. On Monday, the airline's Deputy General Director, Alexander Smirnov, says the crash could not have been caused by a technical fault or human error.
There are no such faults like engine failure or system failure. There is no such combination of a systems failure that could lead to a plane breaking up in the air.
Instead, Smirnov says, the crash could only have come from some mechanical or physical action, but he did not elaborate.
That is why the only possible explanation for a breakup of the aircraft in the air could be a certain impact.
An Egyptian militant group affiliated with Islamic State said it brought down the plane because of Russia's airstrikes in Syria, a claim that was dismissed by Russian officials.
Israeli troops in the occupied West Bank shot and killed a Palestinian in what the army said was another day of knife attacks. Israeli authorities also reported a knifing attack near Tel Aviv in which they said 3 people were injured. Here's more.
There is no respite in a wave of deadly violence that has gripped Israel and the occupied West Bank, and Palestinian funerals have become a daily occurrence. This is the site of one alleged stabbing attack in the West Bank. Israeli forces at Al-Jalama checkpoint north of Jenin shot and killed a Palestinian whom they claimed had tried to stab a soldier. The military said troops approached 2 Palestinians who looked suspicious at a petrol station near the checkpoint between Israel and the West Bank. It said soldiers shot one of the suspects and arrested the other. In the West Bank village of Qattana, near Hebron, Palestinians held a funeral procession for 2 youths killed by the army. Both were buried at the village cemetery. The bodies of the young men, 22-year-old Mohammed Shamasne and 23-year-old Omar al-Faqih, have just been handed back by the Israeli troops to their families. The attacks have spread to Israel. In Russian Lysian, near Tel Aviv, a Palestinian stabbed and wounded 3 Israelis before being arrested. A police statement said the 19-year-old from Hebron stabbed 2 people on the pavement and a third in a store. At least 70 Palestinians and 10 Israelis have been killed in the violence since the start of October, raising fears of another Palestinian intifada or uprising. There is no end in sight to the killings amid accusations that Israeli troops have been light on the trigger. Hiba Al-Atoum for the News at 10.
International envoy to Syria Stefan de Mistura said he believed the Syrian government and representatives of the opposition should be involved in the working groups in the follow-up of the Vienna talks. Participants in the Vienna meeting had called for a nationwide ceasefire and the renewal of stalled UN-brokered talks between the Syrian government and the opposition. But they failed to agree on the issue of which role President Bashar al-Assad should take in a future Syria. The envoy spoke in Damascus, where he had a series of meetings with government officials.
We have been discussing the aspects of the Vienna talks because the Syrian government was not present, neither the opposition. And I think it's very important that everyone in Syrians should be involved and associated. So that's my duty, and I'm doing it.
Meantime, the Russian Defense Ministry said its Air Force flew 131 sorties and hit 237 targets in Syria in the last 2 days. The ministry said the Air Force hit targets in Syria's Hama, Latakia, Homs, Damascus, Aleppo and Raqqa provinces. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Russia needs help to find a political solution in Syria and not simply support President Assad. The U.S. military said the American-led coalition against Daesh conducted 17 airstrikes against the militant group in Iraq. The coalition continued to target the contested cities of Ramadi and Sinjar with 4 and 5 strikes respectively, denying militants access to terrain around Ramadi. It said other strikes hit near Mosul, Tel Afar, Beji, Kisik, Makhmur and Habaniya. Iraq said its Air Force also conducted what it called painful and destructive airstrikes on Daesh targets in the province of Salah ad-Din north of the capital Baghdad. A statement said a number of militants had been killed in the action, which had destroyed bases and booby-trapped armored vehicles. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan cast the return of the country's Islamist-rooted AK party to single-party rule as a vote for stability that the world must respect. But his opponents fear it heralds deeper polarization. In a general election on Sunday, the AK party consolidated support from the right to claw back a parliamentary majority that will bolster Erdogan's grip on power. It was a personal triumph for Erdogan, who, despite being constitutionally above party politics, as head of state, had shaped the AK party's executive committee and its parliamentary candidates in the run-up to the vote. The result handed the AK party 317 of the 550 seats in parliament, only 13 short of the number Erdogan would need for a nation referendum on constitutional changes. He wants to forge a presidential system granting him full executive powers. European election observers voiced concerns over the poll.
Fear is the enemy of democracy, enemy of a free choice. And in this sense, we are disappointed of the quality of the process. And in light of this, it's even more vital, and this is an appeal, that the President works in the future for a more inclusive political process. He does not overdo with his power he got.
Meanwhile, the White House congratulated Turkey on the election, but it said it was deeply concerned that media outlets and journalists were subject to pressure during the election campaign. The German government also welcomed the fact that elections in Turkey were peaceful. A government spokesman said an outright election win for the ruling AK party was to be respected. Iran said it had begun shutting down uranium enrichment centrifuges under the terms of a deal struck with 6 world powers in July on limiting its nuclear program. Tehran's atomic energy chief Ali Akbar Salehi said it was important that there be balance in implementing the deal. He signaled Tehran's stance in an interview with Japan's NHK TV that all sanctions against Iran should be lifted promptly in step with its dismantling of nuclear infrastructure.
We have already started to take our measures vis-à-vis the removal of the centrifuge machines, the extra centrifuge machines. We hope in 2 months' time we are able to exhaust our commitment.
A rare tropical cyclone packing hurricane force winds killed 3 people and injured scores on the Yemeni island of Socotra. The UN World Meteorological Organization said the storm, named Chapala, was an extremely severe cyclonic storm with sustained winds of 160 to 185 kilometers per hour. It described sea conditions around the center of the storm were phenomenal. Slightly weakened, the storm is expected to hit the mainland tomorrow morning near the port of Mokalla. The United Nations Refugee Agency said a record influx of migrants had crossed the border between Serbia and Croatia in the past 24 hours. Thousands of people queued as volunteers and aid workers led them across in groups of 50 at a time. Refugees and migrants continue to flow into the Balkans, with thousands concerned that Europe's borders will soon close. Migrants said that as the number of people crossing into Europe increases, smugglers have been charging higher prices to cross the Aegean Sea and cramming higher numbers of people onto boats filled well beyond their capacity. The UNHCR announced that a monthly record of 218,394 migrants and refugees arrived in Europe by sea in October.
More than 8,500 people passed during the day from midnight up to midnight, and was the highest number that we have had since the starting of the influx here in this border in one day. Number of people are increasing drastically. Before the last week we had an average of 5,000–6,000 per day, but now we see that more than 8,000 are passing, and today also the influx seems to be really very high.
Australian pop star Kylie Minogue flicked the switch on London's famous Oxford Street Christmas lights in front of thousands of fans. Silver lights and 445 golden decorations have been installed to create the effect of falling snowfalls. For the first time, the street was closed to all traffic in advance of the switch on. Another first was that the lights have been turned on much earlier than ever before on November, a move criticized by some on social media but defended by organizers. Manchester City held a training session at their foggy training ground to prepare for their Group D Champions League match in Spain against Sevilla tomorrow. City come into the match fresh from a 2-1 win over the Norwich City, ensuring they remain top of the Premier League on goal differences from Arsenal. On the other hand, Sevilla have been struggling in La Liga, losing 2-1 at Villarreal, which left them in 9th place after 10 matches.
Yes, Willie.
And Real Madrid coach Rafael Benitez said his team will need a lot of concentration to secure another 3 points as they face Paris Saint-Germain in their Champions League second leg match tomorrow. The 10 times European champions who took on Paris Saint-Germain at home in Group A are still unbeaten this season, but Benitez reckons they have more to give. Benitez confirmed that midfielder James Rodriguez will be back on the pitch, though he will not be able to play the whole match. Now a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy to cloudy across many regions, with a chance for local thundery showers in the country's south and east. Unstable conditions will start to affect the country, with a continued chance for rain across the south. Thundery showers will extend to the central and eastern regions tomorrow evening. With the gusty easterly winds, the port city of Aqaba should expect some local showers with slightly choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here are our top stories once again. Investigators of the deadly crash of a Russian plane in Egypt says it's not struck from the outside, and the pilot does not make a distress call before it disappears from radar. Israeli troops kill a Palestinian in the occupied West Bank, and 3 Israelis are stabbed near Tel Aviv. And Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan says the return of the Islamist-rooted AK party to single-party rule is a vote for stability. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Lawal Balkar. Thank you for watching and have a lovely evening.